Hi, welcome back to another episode of Mix and Matchbox. I'm your host, Brent Feldman, and we're joined today by Mike Demo. They're the partnership lead North America at hosting.com. Hi, Mike. How's it going?
It's good. I'm doing well. Happy to chat with you. Happy Monday.
Yeah, definitely. Happy Monday as well. Definitely looking forward to jumping into the questions here. You've been heavily involved with Joomla early in your career, which is also a CMS that is very near and dear to our hearts at Matchbox, that we leveraged basically shortly after starting the company. And how did you get from doing things with Joomla into where you're at now at hosting.com?
Well, that's a journey. So my first real CMS was probably PHP Nuke back in the day. And then from there, I was looking for something new, and I was poking around Fantastico in cPanel, which those that know that tool, basically it was Softaculous before Softaculous, like a different company, but basically it's what it was. And I just stumbled upon Mambo, and so started playing around with Mambo, and did that whole thing, and then noticed that the Mambo community, like the development was a little slow. Like something happened like about a year after I started Mambo, and then I went to Joomla and from also Fantastico, and I'm like, this looks a lot like Mambo. And then of course now I know the history of the fork from Mambo to Joomla, but I wasn't really involved in the community back then. And I just started doing it professionally, working at agencies for community banks and credit unions, which is funny because that's one of your specialties, as well as private equity firms was the other niche that I really spent a lot of time at, and really got to know the community and started going to the conferences. I joined the team as supporting the finance team, helping get sponsorship for the project because it's a nonprofit, well, not for profit technically, and working on the Joomla World Conference and all that fun stuff. Eventually became the treasurer and joined InMotion Hosting as their open source evangelist. But when Todd, the co-founder of InMotion Hosting, said, "Hey, I got this new thing, but it's not Joomla," and I'm like, "That's fine." So I was like, "What's that?" And then it was Bold Grid, which is the drag and drop builder suite that InMotion Hosting kind of launched. And I was there for a while, did all that, really got to in on the WordPress community, and been focused on WordPress ever since. And now I'm at hosting.com and helping all open source CMS projects. Obviously, WordPress is a big focus of ours, but we still go to Joomla events, we still go to Drupal events because PHP is PHP. And what I find interesting about the small niche CMS communities is that they really appreciate when hosts give them attention, because a lot of them feel kind of like the forgotten stepchild, when at the end of the day, open source is my passion. My favorite quote I stole from my friend Jessica Dunbar, who was the evangelist for Concrete 5. I'm not married to a CMS. I'm in an open source relationship.
Ah, there we go. I love that. And actually paying attention to other CMSs that are out there, because I feel like sometimes WordPress just really gobbles all the air in the room. It's a wonderful CMS. We love it. We've been like on the platform for years. But yeah, actually, there's other great CMSs and they fulfill great functions and stuff. So it's nice to hear you talk about it in such a way that it is. It's a very open sort of thing. And at the end of the day, I also think vying for the open source community is also such an important thing, where I don't think people realize how critical that is to the functioning of all of these platforms, and that so many people give their time generously to see them succeed. So anyway, it's cool.
Yeah, and what's funny is I find a lot of people in the WordPress community are very tribalism, like WordPress needs to be best and needs to be number one, but it should be open source versus the the non-open source stuff. And Matt Mullenweg, the co-founder of WordPress, he does this too. Like he contributes financially as a member to the Drupal Foundation. Automatic sponsors a lot of the Drupal conferences.
Mhm.
And they have kind of like an open source area, and they do different talks from different projects. And a lot of the project teams, collaborate, especially on security and things like that. So what's funny is that the projects get it. It's
Mhm.
just a lot of the community, I think, likes to, feel like they're on the winning team when
Uh-huh.
it's really open source versus not open source in my mind.
You couldn't have said it better. Oh, that's great. Well, cool. Well, you've worked in and around agencies like serving banks and credit unions, and actually, I know you just mentioned it here. So, what did that sort of world teach you about what these institutions actually need versus what vendors assume they need?
Yeah, it's interesting. So a lot of the clients that we would have, obviously, it was up community banks and credit unions. I would say more focused on credit unions. Obviously, they're there for their members, but the web for most of these institutions, the marketing site was not really the focus. It was how to serve the members better. And a lot of the time, the people we would teach on like how to update it and maintain it would be, not people in the marketing team. They would be tellers, or they would be, administrative assistants and people that have been at the institution a long time. So I think a lot of people have this misconception of, these institutions being so focused on assets or focused on this or that, when at the end of the day, I think it's more focused on serving the members. And if the website's can help for that, it's a tool, but it's not what people, they're not, it's a means to an end, I guess is a way to put it.
Yeah.
That's kind of a weird answer, but I was always surprised at who I was training to like
Mhm.
update the interest rates and things, and uh, it was not what I was expecting. Sure, there's big credit unions that have marketing teams, but a lot of the time, it's it's like one person, and I always found that surprising.
No, that's super salient, and I mean it makes sense because when we've been looking at at organizations and working with them, I think the assumption is that there's like a huge marketing team backing this group, and it can be that they have tons of different positions, tons of people working for the organization, lots of different branches, lots of things out there, but the people running the marketing at the end of the day, usually it's pretty tight and it's close knit, and yeah, it may only be one person really. So I think that's also helpful to stay cognizant about what is important to anybody who may be using one of those websites, keeping the editing experience easy so it doesn't, sort of overcomplicate somebody else's job who may have their mind on, being a teller, doing like, some other functions for the bank. So that's actually really good to keep in mind to, make sure that you're appealing to just about anybody who may be working on it, making sure the interface is easy to use, the back end editing capabilities, because they don't need yet another job on their plate.
100%. So I had developed this concept of, I called it a cat template, a client admin template. And so we would always have a view that was when you would log in, and you would see just like the three buttons you need, because 99% of the time they just need to update the interest rate, update the loan rates, put on we're closed, due to this holiday or whatever, like status message, and then like maybe an event calendar. So those are what they do 99% of the time. So we would literally hide all the rest of the CMS from them to just the things they need. Now, there would always be a button that could go over to the full native CMS template. I don't believe in locking clients out of an open source CMS. Otherwise, why are you using the CMS? But like, it just makes it super easy. And I kind of stole the idea from Randy Carey, who kind of talked about this idea of, you know, admin templates being used to service what they're actually doing with it, instead of just having so many options. Because I hated having to train clients and be like, don't touch this, don't touch this, don't touch this. And it was just frustrating, and it just is overwhelming. So log in, see the 5 buttons or the 3 things that you do all the time, and just have easy access to that.
Yeah. Wow. Honestly, that's fantastic advice. Yeah, it's now going to make me think about how maybe we approach a new panel for what we provide to admins, because seriously, just making anybody's job easier on a content editing front, just yeah, if you can simplify one thing in a person's day, maybe it just makes the experience so much better. It's so cool that you made the jump also from agency side work into actually working on, platform infrastructure kind of stuff. But what made you feel like that was the right next move for you? And then what kind of surprised you when you actually got into that world?
Yeah, so I've been in the hosting space a very long time, but mostly focused on partnerships, relationships, evangelism, that sort of stuff. So obviously I've interfaced with product teams and infrastructure teams, but that's not really my focus. My focus is people. And that's what I loved most about doing the agency work. Even though I was the senior dev, I liked being on the client calls, and the sales team would keep bringing me on the client calls because I was good at talking to clients without being overly technical. And I could speak clients, so like I can translate. So that's what I like about it. What does surprise me a lot is from like the hosting space is the size of some of the organizations, the institutional knowledge that's important, but also how easy it is for perception to change your feeling on your provider. And so I like the phrase perception's reality. So it is what, if you had a really bad experience recently with a provider and you had 10 years of great experiences, you're going to remember that one that didn't go that well. And depending on, your relationship, you might be willing to give a benefit of a doubt, but people talk about the bad experiences. They don't talk about the good experiences. So that's been my biggest surprise in this world is how commoditized a lot of clients feel it is, which it's up to the providers to add value beyond just the bare minimum through value adds and other services and things. Like at hosting.com, we do weekly agency training webinars that you don't even have to be a customer, and we get hundreds of agencies on that. And so many people have emailed me being like, oh, we really appreciate that. And the content team, the community team does a great job on that. So I would say that's been my biggest surprise is kind of how clients perceive the vendors. But on the flip side, if they have a really good experience, they're super loyal and they'll stick with that vendor a very long time. So it's kind of two sides of the same coin. But even though we get that as customers, it's not always noticeable. And I always use the example like Comcast. Everyone loves Comcast, right? Comcast Internet, Xfinity.
Everybody.
Best customer service in the world, right? What's funny is if you actually look at the surveys that have been done on Comcast, it is like a 98% satisfaction rate.
Really?
Yeah. If you look at like the JD Power stuff, like, so that's my point, right? Is that it takes such a small percentage to change people's opinion of an entire brand.
Wow. Yeah.
And that is what I try to do on every interaction with any of our clients or prospective clients or partners, is just have them have a good experience. And if I can add value and help them, I will. If that means our products, great. If it means not our products, that's fine too. And I do that in a lot of weird ways. I'm known for doing lots of weird human-centric focused things. During COVID, I sent a lot, 50 of our partners at InMotion, when I was at InMotion back then, 80 pounds of pasta, dry pasta in the mail, and with a handwritten card. And people still bring that up to this day.
Yeah.
I just weird things that get people to remember you. That's that's what people talk about. I handed out Tide pens, like when I was at Bold Grid. These Tide pens that are branded, I handed out 100,000 of these. To this day, people still pull these out in person and show them to me. The Tide pen that I gave them 10 years, 5, 6, 7 years ago. To the point that we now actually have these at hosting.com.
That's
So
great.
because we're at WordCamp US, and it kept getting brought up, like, do you have Tide pens? Do you have Tide pens? Do you have Tide pens? To both InMotion and to me at our table. And InMotion's like, no, we don't have the Tide pens anymore. And then everyone coming to me being like, oh yeah, you gave me the Tide pen last time. Do you have more of those? And I get tagged probably a couple times a month, just 5, 6 years later. So whatever you can do to add value is kind of my passion. So that's a really long answer. I'm sorry, but
no, that's great. I think that is good. Well, and also I think you should get a kickback from Tide. They've had considerable investment, but it's one of those clutch resources at a conference. I don't know about you. I'm just going to self-admittedly say that I always seem to make a mess on myself whenever, and especially if you're trying to like hurry, navigate lunch while you're, like going through like different conference sessions. It's actually, I feel like it's one of the small things. Good move though.
Yeah, coffee stain on your shirt, whatever, yeah, no, I'm definitely a spiller. And so once I've realized you can get custom branded Tide pens officially, it again, it's one of those things that, like, when I brought up the idea to like my manager and stuff, people are like, that's the stupidest idea ever. I'm like, trust me, people will love it, and they do. But again, it's just whatever your thing is, find a way to be human, and not just selling yourself. If you can add value, over time it'll just the business will take care of itself.
That's awesome. Well, actually, from your perspective, and this may be kind of a hot take thing though, but what are some of the biggest mistakes, especially in regards to like, hosting, but that agencies make? What are the biggest mistakes that they're making in terms of either performance, security, or client trust? And that can be for regulated industries like, like banking, credit union and stuff, or in general, because I'm sure that you see, probably either notions that have been baked in, like for agencies, that they're just making mistakes and they don't even realize it, or they do and they keep doing it.
Yeah. I think probably a few things come to mind. First and foremost, I think agencies as a whole treat hosting as a commodity and as a key part of the stack. They think it's something that they can, roll their own or kind of, do it themselves, or it doesn't really matter where you host. And that just isn't true. I've seen hosts disappear overnight, unfortunately. I've known companies that have lost their websites. The decisions you make on where you host matter. And that doesn't necessarily mean hosting.com is the solution for everything, but write down your priorities. Is it cost? Is it phone support? Does that phone support need to be US based? Do you care? What's the response time? What's the SLA? Do they have failover? Write down what actually matters to you and then make those decisions, or at least talk your client through those things. So I would say, treating hosting as an afterthought is probably a number one complaint, number one thing that I see that a lot of that a lot of agencies make. And it could be different per client. Maybe one client needs managed and another one is okay and shared, or whatever the case is, but have a discussion. And also, I just actually posted an article about this on Forbes. Ask your client what's important to them. Are they a nonprofit? Are they a nonprofit in the environmental industry? Like, I was at WordCamp, where was WordCamp US last year? Portland. Portland.
Yeah.
All these people are like, oh yeah, I'm from Portland and I have clients here. And I'm like, oh cool, what type of sites? And they're all like environmental sites. And I'm like, okay, great. Do you use green hosting? And they're like, what's green hosting? And I'm like, this is such an easy win. You guys, I talked to like 10 agencies that focus just on nonprofits, and just ask the question, find out what's important to them. If it's if you focus on different affinity groups like the LGBT community, well, there's a domain registrar that is certified by the LGBT Chamber of Commerce, as own, you have them be your domain registrar. Those little signals are what will get people talking about you and will remember you, because it shows you actually care about them beyond just the project. So figure out what's important to you and your clients, and then make decisions based on that. And then the other mistake that I see done a lot is just not having a good backup plan. So relying on just the host backups, or not testing your backups. I find that's a big issue. Host backups are probably okay in the majority of cases, but you never know what's going to happen. And you want to make sure you have offsite backup. So at hosting.com, we do 14 days of backups for most of our plans that agencies use. And then I recommend that that agencies send it to cold storage after that. So like Amazon Glacier, you can store like a year's worth of WordPress backups for like $5. It's crazy how cheap it is.
Yeah.
Now, this caveat of Amazon Glacier is it can take up to 6 hours to be able to get that data back out, because it's cold storage. But if you have 14 days of live stuff that you can access quickly, and then the rest of it, is there, just have a backup plan. I would say is, make sure the stuff is where it needs to be. And then last but not least, security. Talk about two-factor authentication with your clients. Talk about what that means. And also talk about the types of two-factor and the risks related to SMS versus email versus using an Authenticator app or a YubiKey. My biggest two-factor, I'm a fan of YubiKeys. I like, we forced every bank and credit we used to use a YubiKey to log into the site. Did we annoy lots of people? Yes. But we knew that if they didn't have that physical key plus the username and password, they couldn't get into the site. Yeah. And for that industry, that we felt that was a good trade-off. Yeah. So basically just think about the things that you take for granted is kind of the TLDR.
Yeah, definitely. That's helpful. There's so many different factors that goes into it, but you started with just basically saying like, don't treat it like a commodity. And I feel like that is so important. Like, make sure if you're going to care what other organizations that you put your trust and money into care about, like make sure you're vetting that for your hosting company too. Make sure that you're thinking about some of the baseline things like security, and I feel like it's helpful just to keep the basics in mind. But sometimes people if they're just in a rush where they're not thinking about it, or oh, this meets the grade price wise, they aren't putting the rest of those things as a priority.
Yeah. Can I give one other quick answer?
Yeah.
So I would also say the other thing that I find that agencies make the mistake all the time is forums. All agencies all the time, and I did a talk on this a few years ago. I would say the majority of agencies are building forums incorrectly, because in most forum plugins in WordPress, the vast majority of them, same with Joomla, it's not encrypted in the table. And think about the forums that most websites have. There's PPI in that.
Right.
And it's not encrypted. I've seen it. And it's more than just it's a job application, so we need to make sure it's encrypted. Depending on your jurisdiction or things, all of this data just sits in the database, and it never gets cleaned up. It never gets sanitized. It never gets salt or hashed. Now, yes, there's ways to make it encrypted. There's ways to make it safe. But 99% of agencies don't even think about it. They just build forms, build forms, build forms. I've seen forms for credit applications, on, just publicly in the database. And again, it's one of those things that if you don't know, you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. But they're like, oh, well, the site's secure. So, and this form is a great form builder. Well, it might be an amazing form builder, but no form builder that I know of on WordPress out of the box has encryption. Now, a lot of them have plugins or options that you can use encryption, but it's not just like a default setting. So audit your forms, make sure that that data can be in the database unencrypted. And if that data went out and you told your client that, make sure it wouldn't be an issue. And if it is an issue, fix it, you know. And if you don't want to use the work to, use a plugin to encrypt, to use your form plugin to encrypt on your local database or whatever, there's services out there like FormStack as HIPAA compliant and, encrypted at rest stuff. And there's lots of providers that offer similar things, but you can also do it just naturally in your CMS, but you just have to think about it. Forms all the time. I can't tell you how many times people just don't think about it, and then something happens, and then they lose all that data, and then it's not fun.
Yeah, I mean, like just recently, and especially also as we talk about like banks and credit unions, like the security, not just like scams, but like just like general best practice security stuff has to be top of mind. And it like we're dealing I don't know. Oh, I feel so bad by using this term, but like we're in unprecedented times, but we are like, but I feel like every new era in terms of like, security or scams, all that sort of stuff is going to be unprecedented because it's uncharted waters. People come up with new ways, new, sort of things to do. But if you aren't taken care of, like, I don't know, you referred to this before as like, table stakes sometimes of like, the bare necessities, you're really missing, huge opportunities to prevent future headaches as well as potentially big problems. Personal, identifiable information that goes into forms that could be, huge, disastrous. And that's where it's funny. I think sometimes we get desensitized to it. You get another like letter in the mail or something that's like, oh, this was compromised. And so like, call up TransUnion or something. But I feel like some of that desensitizing leads us into maybe making less decisions for our benefit to just like do the right things from the get-go,
Yeah, and I think a lot of times agencies specifically have this like, not my circus, not my monkeys mentality. Banks and credit unions, I think, are a good example, right? Like, I mean, I can't speak for you, but I'm pretty confident can say you guys are not touching the core bank provider. You're not touching any of the software that actually does anything financial. And same with us now, wrappers and all of that. But at the end of the day, even if the core financial product is safe, if there's a defacement, the trust in the institution is gone.
Yep.
Even if it actually had nothing to do, like, oh well, we don't touch the financial aspect, which that's good. That's not your business, and it's good that you don't have to touch that. But just because even if that technically stayed safe, it doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt the reputation or any of that. So even if it can be technically, safe from a security standpoint, there can still be harm done reputationally. And then of course, obviously, there's a lot of things that could be done in the browser, and that could be bad. But yeah, so I hear it a lot with like e-commerce stores, like, well, it goes to Stripe and we don't store any of the credit card data. Well, fine, but if the email list gets exposed and then everyone gets emailed a scam, you can tell people that, oh, your credit card data is safe, but it's still not going to be fun.
Yeah, definitely. Well, actually, this is perfect because like while we're on this about, maybe some of these things that people don't consider, if you were, let's say in a bank's shoes, bank or credit union evaluating a website partner, what are the hosting security questions that they should ask, but maybe usually don't? And what are good answers versus maybe red flags where you're like, oh, these people have no idea what they're talking about?
Yeah. So from a host, ask if they're using a public cloud or if it's their own infrastructure. Ask if they have any certifications or compliance, such as I think it's ISO 3701 or 2701, but I can never remember, or SOC 2, any of that. So just to kind of ask about that. if it's medical, HIPAA, compliance, all that. Ask what their disaster recovery plan is. Ask what their SLA is for response times. Um, just basic questions. If they have the certifications and they can point you to like the SOC 2 compliance or the HIPAA compliance or any of that, they usually have most of the boxes checked. So I would say that's just a bare minimum. Just make sure they have the certifications. Then ask if they're using a public cloud or if they have their own hardware. And that's also important because then you're not relying on a third party that you have to, it just takes out another man in the middle, like to deal with for like, of access of the data. And then where the data center is, because depending on your industry, there might be data sovereignty needs or requirements. And also ask if they have a location near you. Like when we were in Minnesota, when I was doing this at my company, we had a data center at downtown Minneapolis because we were dealing with all local banks and credit unions, and we wanted it to be as fast as possible for them. Now, the internet's a lot faster than it was 15 years ago, but so it's less important now. But if you have a choice, yeah, you want the data center to be closer to the customers than farther away.
Yep.
At least in the same country.
Absolutely. Well, there's been a couple times as we've been talking here that you've mentioned like, outages, disaster recovery, things like that. When something goes wrong, like an outage incident, performance degradation, what does good response look like from a hosting standpoint? Like what communication, timelines, ownership, like what do you find that hosting.com does that you feel like, oh, this is a great way if we have issues, which hopefully you don't, and, but what does good response look like?
Yeah, so have a status page that's publicly accessible and not tied to, hopefully not on the same infrastructure or hosting, so that, because having a status page that's not accessible is just not useful, right? So have a status page that's useful. Proactively send out communications if there's something that needs to be aware of. But also have an SLA, that kind of makes sense. Some hosts you have to pay extra for enhanced service level agreements. But like look into them, and like it's very easy to be like, well, we guarantee 3 nines or 4 nines or 5 nines, or it's just, but what does that really mean? But if you read it, it's like, well, if we miss it, you'll get a refund back on the credit that didn't work. And that doesn't really help. Like you need to know, like, how long until a ticket gets replied to. Can you reach somebody? And some of this might have cost behind it from different providers. But depending on your customer, that's okay. And then have access. Think of if you have the ability, have failover opportunities. So like on our virtual dedicated server product, we have dual redundancy on every piece of hardware, so that hopefully nothing happens. But obviously nothing's perfect. Cloudflare's had outages recently, and big brands have been affected. We were lucky that we were not, even though we use Cloudflare in some of our products, we were not affected on any of our existing customers. We couldn't sell new stuff, but nobody, and it just has to do with how we were using. We were just, I would say, fortunate on how we use the Cloudflare API. But I couldn't sell you a new server at the time, but at least you weren't down. But yeah, so just kind of talk about the SLA, see if you have an account manager. If you have, I just like having a person to yell at, right? Yeah. Basically, just be honest. Yeah. And that's the job, honestly, is like for a lot of agencies that I talk to, is they're just happy to have someone. They might not ever need it, but they're just happy to have somebody. Yeah. Because you just never want to feel like you're just a number kind of lost in the shuffle. Yeah. So again, it just goes back to having a discussion and figuring out what your risk tolerance is. And then, you'll pay more for better access or better SLAs or whatever the case is, but none of this is new. Like if you're using AWS, for example, or Azure, if you want actually good support from AWS, you're paying $500 to $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
To get anything that is remotely within 6 hours. And is not just a ticket system that is just automated and shit. And even then, you're still going to do, it's so big, you never get to get the same person every time. And so I really like how our support team takes ownership and, helps clients all the way through from beginning to end. And if it isn't an us thing, we'll try to help them if we can. Like there was an agency who had a bunch of sites down, but they used a third-party WAF provider that wasn't through us. I did the research. I was like, oh, hey, this is what's happening. Here's a link to their doc. Here's how you can get around it for now. Things like that. It wasn't an us thing, but instead of us saying, well, it's not, we're fine, taking that little bit of extra time and being like, oh, we noticed your DNS is doing this. And, we checked their status page and then they noticed that they were having this outage, and you can either bypass it this way or you can wait for them to, get back or whatever the case may be. So taking that little extra time to beyond just the not my problem, go away, just to try to help the solution, because hosts get a lot of questions that aren't hosting related just due to the nature of the beast.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I could see how that at a certain point that's probably, exhausting, but at the same time, trying to be at least remotely helpful, especially understanding just, being compassionate to people's situation, because this, could be devastating for an organization, a business, and, and just providing that little bit of support. What is kind of interesting, you've touched on like WAF like a couple of times, and I think like the biggest thing is like everybody's like secure minded. What is secure hosting in your mind? Like what are the layers of security that matter most?
Yeah, so I'm going to preface this and say I'm not a security expert, so there are people that are much more knowledgeable than me, but security, in my opinion, is multifaceted. So it starts on the application level. So let's take WordPress as an example, and make sure that that's secure, making sure it stays up to date for any security packages. Make sure that you're using two-factor authentication and a good two-factor authentication. Then from there, the CMS is not CMS, the control panel it lives on. So I know lots of people that use two-factor on WordPress, but they don't use two-factor on cPanel, probably because they didn't know it was there, or two-factor on SSH. Things that just people don't know. So make sure the PHP is up to date. All of that stuff on the server level. Does it have a product like Immunify 360 or some other sort of scanner? In addition to maybe you have something on the WordPress level if you want to go a little bit extra beyond. But then from there, the host might have an overarching security layer. So at hosting.com, we just announced that we're rolling out Monarch's AR security on our whole infrastructure. It literally sits above, it's not an application level thing, it sits above the whole infrastructure. And then on top of that, you can even add in a web application firewall if you'd like, which stops all traffic before it even hits the server. So especially if you like close the IP so that it has to come through the WAF so that the stuff can't get loaded. So at the end of the day, you just need to add as many layers as possible to try to make it annoying, because a lot of the stuff is automated. The odds of somebody going after your client specifically are basically unless now for like banks and credit unions and certain institutions that changes a lot, but for most SMBs, nobody's after you, nobody cares about your coffee shop. But if you have plugins that are out of date, if you have PHP that's out of date, if you're not doing good security practices, that's when stuff can go wrong really quickly. And a lot of times you might not even know. Like, I've known people that have had their servers compromised just for emails and they didn't even know. So just add as many layers as possible is kind of what it boils down to. And that has annoyance to it, so you need to find the convenience versus security factor. But that's kind of why I'm a big fan of like hardware physical security, because it adds just an extra layer. But even if you have a YubiKey, but you have outdated PHP, it doesn't really matter, because then you can still just get in through a different way. So long story short, just have a bunch of layers and make sure everything's up to date. And please, please, please do not just install plugins and extensions left and right. Think about it.
Yeah.
That's a mistake agencies make all the time, is they treat these plugins and extensions like an app store.
Right.
WordPress core does so much. WordPress core, Joomla, core Drupal, these core CMSs have so much power behind them that nobody touches. And they always just default to a plugin. Use core first, because the least amount of third-party things, the better. Like WordPress VIP, which is a hosting product by Automatic. Everyone gets, always is like, oh man, it's hard to get VIP certified, and every plugin has to go through their check, and every theme has to go through their check, and every agency has to be certified by them. Yeah, but they're hosting things like Time Magazine, Consumer Reports, big publications, and it makes sense for those types of clients. So it goes back to, not one product is going to be the same best for everybody. You just need to think about it for the specific use case and find what makes sense for that need or that client or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Wow, you mentioned the VIP things. Boy, that brought back memories. Yeah, because we had a site that was on VIP, and yeah, everything was scrutinized. But for a real good purpose. I think you're right that people are, oh boy, we've inherited sites that have like 70 plugins on them or more, and you're just like, wow. Even thinking about it from the standpoint of unraveling problems, if there was one, all of those could have dependencies on each other that makes a real, not only security nightmare, but also just like development mishaps. What if something stops functioning? So yeah, oh boy, that I feel like that's a hallmark of like groups that know enough to be dangerous. And that is where, it can be truly terrifying. And then ever more so as you get into like things like banks and credit unions that, need to understand the componentry that is being utilized, because obviously, yeah, how do you make sure that you're remediating problems on, something where you've got so many things going on?
Yeah. And a lot of times it's people, it might be the client, it might be the agency, it might be both. They have a need, they search for it in the directory, they install it. Oh, that worked, or it didn't work. And then, they probably just leave it. So like a lot of times, most of those 70 plugins aren't even being used.
Yeah, which is also more terrifying, or updated for that matter,
Yeah. But again, I think people think about it like the app store on their phone.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'll just install stuff, whatever. Yeah, it might use up some storage, but what's the big deal?
Yeah. Yeah. So I know recently you were invited to the Forbes Agency Council and are leading a hosting and infrastructure group. What themes are you hearing from agency leaders right now about like delivery risk, margin pressure, and sort of like the behind the scenes ops stuff?
Yeah, so the Forbes Agency Council, I'm very honored to have been invited to be a part of that group, and even more so to be able to be one of the leaders of one of the subgroups in there. Which, by the way, Forbes Council Agency Pulse is a free newsletter. You can sign up just for free, and you'll get emailed every 2 weeks articles from the council members. So check that out; it's free. As far, I'm hearing a lot of like margin pressure. So from people being like, we're all fighting for the same thing. Like, I asked a question like, hey, how do you like to deal with host price increases? Do you prefer them to be annual? Do you prefer for them to be, wait as long as possible? Because I know some hosts that, do very little increases every year, other ones that wait until they absolutely have to. And I gave some examples like, well, cPanels had X number of price increases in the last decade. NVMe disks I think are 2 or 3 times what they were even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Everything's a lot more money. And then what I heard from a bunch of these agency owners is like, I'm not a host. This isn't my problem. I'm just fighting for margin. And I think that is where it can get dangerous when you think about hosting as a commodity. So go, figure out what makes sense for you. But I am hearing a lot of pressure on people that are scared about AI. They're scared about a lot of this different solutions, things like that, which I have thoughts on AI. I don't think the sky is falling. I remember when CMS started coming out and people were upset at that because then no one's going to want to hire a developer. And then when Squarespace and Weebly came out, no one's going to want to hire me to make their WordPress site. It's people that are going to build their own stuff. They're always going to build their own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And people will always hire professionals. I mean, think about any industry out there. There are still people that pay for those products and services. I mean, we make fun of people like AOL. AOL just shut down their dial-up internet this year, and everyone was like, "Oh, that's so funny." They had like 40,000 paying customers at the end of it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And people are like, "Oh, well, they didn't know any better." Well, according to the last census, like 200,000 Americans only can get internet on dial-up.
Mm-hmm.
So, don't AI is not going to take away your job. You just need to pivot.
Yeah.
I remember once I was in New York for a Joomla conference in New York, and it was canceled the day before by the local organizers because I guess they didn't have enough signups or something. And then they did an emergency, can Joomla be saved meeting? And they're all like, everyone here, WordPress is taking all of our business. WordPress is taking all of our business. And it was me with some other, big volunteers that have been in the community a while. And we're like, I've never lost, and this is when I was doing Joomla, not WordPress. So like 15 years ago, but, or whatever. But I was like, WordPress, I never lost a job for WordPress. No, clients aren't hiring me for a CMS. They're hiring us for their expertise. So, is it annoying? Yes. Will some clients play with AI and, leave? Yes. But there'll always be people that want expertise. So, you just need to pivot and add value. So yes, there is pressure on margin, but I think the agencies are figuring out, at least what I'm hearing, is how to add value and be that expert beyond just a service provider. And that's why I recommend agencies niche down as heavy as you can on something that really well. Like for you guys, banks and credit unions. I did private equity firms at my second agency that I was at after the banks and credit union one. So become an expert in your thing, and you probably already have a niche, and figure out what that is and become the person in that niche, the provider, and it'll figure itself out. Again, if you add value, the business will take care of itself.
Yeah.
But margin pressure is a thing because everyone is just fighting for what they can. I also the AI bubble is going to burst. It's going to burst. The tools are going to settle, figure out what makes sense to use on a day-to-day basis. But all the AI companies are losing money. They can't, even on OpenAI and their $200 or $500 a month plans, they're losing money on those customers. So either it's going to get really, really expensive, or it's going to kind of settle down on, okay, AI is good to use for this, not good to use on this. It's gonna settle. My opinion is tools are tools. Just don't be one.
Yeah. Boy, we don't have time to rabbit hole into this, but I very much align with your theory on AI. So, but maybe another episode.
Sure,
but,
yeah. Yeah, it's fun. It's cool. It's neat. I'm not going to say it. I did an MIT certificate last year on AI. Just to I got certified through a course through MIT last year, and it was super interesting. But that was more just the mathematical big data stuff, not the generative part. A lot more calculus than I was expecting when I signed up for it.
Whew. Oh, wow. That had to be a, a shock.
But I got an MIT certificate, so that's nice.
That is pretty cool. So last question for you really here, looking 12 to 24 months ahead, next, year or two, what sort of changes do you expect in hosting expectations? Whether it be for, banks, people who need a lot of security, or just in general, like, are there big things like kind of already rumblings that aren't so much in the community, but are things that you guys are talking about, like what's on the horizon?
Yeah, so it was interesting. So WebPros and Cloud Linux just came out with a 2026 State of Hosting in Agencies study like last week, and they surveyed tons of agencies, and I think it kind of goes back to what we kind of talked about is I think the middle is getting squeezed out the most. So like I think there's going to be a lot agencies are either going to go down to the commoditized route and just like the basic of the basic or DigitalOcean droplets. But I think the bigger growth opportunity is in the hosting space is service opportunities. So maintenance packages, do it for me products, engineer expertise, stuff beyond just providing, software or infrastructure, being able to really kind of be a partner. Hosting.com, we do that a lot of different ways. One thing that we do for our agency partners is we help some of them write, their proposals and, come up with, strategies to help them close more business. Because at the end of the day, it helps us. So I think that is where I think the market's going is a lot of value add stuff. I think because of that, I don't know what's going to happen with MSP. So MSP stands for managed service providers, that are more traditional in like traditional IT infrastructure and stuff. I think hosts are going to take over a lot more of what MSPs were doing as value. And it makes me wonder what MSPs are going to be doing. Now, if you're an MSP and you're providing like physical infrastructure and stuff like that, you'll be fine. But a lot of MSPs are just kind of providing their expertise on top of just reselling products. So I think hosting is going to add a lot more of that expertise to the end customer as service offerings for lots of different things. So I wonder what's going to happen more in the MSP space than the hosting space.
That makes a lot of sense. That's cool. And I appreciate your perspective on that. Cause like right now, MSPs, if you think about it, like exactly like where are they adding value? How might they pivot based on that? But if the hosts and hosting providers have the access to the customer base already and literally, already have this pipeline to add theoretically more service offerings to them, why not capitalize on that? And I think you're totally right. We're unfortunately in this spot where the middle is getting eroded. And, and there's a lot of, people right now that, maybe aren't providing an extreme amount of value over the lower side of things. So, I absolutely feel like that's going to split. I feel like that's like definitely, oh man, this could be a whole nother conversation about AI and about like the middle eroding. But yeah, I think that's really helpful for people to think about though, and especially MSPs. I actually am part of IAMCP, the International Association of Microsoft Channel Partners, and I do that just for visibility of the other side. It's obviously not my day-to-day in PHP world, but at the same time, it's great to learn about, what does, Azure Cloud and Copilot and all this other sort of stuff look like from that side. But definitely, that's great consideration. Cool. Well, this has been a lot of fun, and I know that we got to talk through a lot of different topics. Anything that anybody should take away from the podcast? Go to hosting.com. I assume. Anything else?
Yeah, hosting.com, hosting.com/agency. I'm most active on X or Twitter, MP Mike. It is a private account just for I don't want to be spammed, but I'll accept it if you're a real person. Just due to some changes on the platform, I don't want a bunch of bot follows. So yeah, and then if I can ever help anyone in anything, and it doesn't just mean hosting or any of our products, don't hesitate to send me an email or a DM, and if I have a resource, I'll be more than happy to help you.
That's cool. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. The whole conversation, I must say, I really appreciate how much you're in it for the community of open source. That I think that means a lot. And, yeah, trying to help people out, because navigating all these things, figuring it out it can be complicated. So definitely thanks for all your input and insight.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this has been another episode of Mix and Matchbox. I'm your host, Brent Feldman. Please look out for more content. Please like and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. Thanks.